Greetings, dear friends. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of us who will be watching this pre-recorded session. Yes, we're doing a little bit different this time for sessions 10, for session 10, chapters 18 and 19 of our book On the Way to a World of Regeneration. When we come and we talk about this amazing book that has taught us so much. Right now, we're towards the end of the book, but there's more to come. I would like to go through 18 chapters 18, 19 before we can go and even talk about an end because it's hard to believe, first of all, right, that we were towards the end of this book. Time has, friends, run so fast this year that sometimes I go back and I'm like, what happened? What happened to all of these months, right? In 2022. But it's a lot of information that we would like to share with you today. And I would like to say that please, before we even get to it, before I forget, um, share your comments, share your questions, perhaps not only for this session, chapters 18 and chapter 19, but also for everything that you may want to comment on if you have read the book, if you have received any enlightenment, if you will, from these teachings as well. This the Just want to go over here with you. As you can see, it has been quite of a journey throughout this year when we start this book, which is also a continuation of these two here that we started a couple of years ago: planetary transition and a dawn of a new era. The difference with this book is that it is a information of what went on during the pandemic, right? And today we're going to talk a little bit more about this as well, especially on chapter 19, when we are talking about the frontline workers, right? But as you can see, we have covered quite a bit, a lot of information. In chapter 18 will be well coordinated action. We'll get to that in a second. And then chapter 19, the frontline workers, which is an amazing chapter as well. Before we go on and we dive into chapter 18, um, one thing first, don't forget to buy your book and don't forget to read it as well, right? And make sure that you share with your family member, brothers and sisters, whoever, because there's a lot of information, especially if you are a spiritist, especially if you are a spiritualist as well. I say this because it allows us to dive into what happens to us during difficult moments and during good moments as well of our lives in the beyond and here. When we go through tough moments of our lives, we tend to think that we are not being helped, not being guided, but it's quite the opposite. There is help always, there is guidance always, and it's really helpful for us to acknowledge this because as we acknowledge this help, the more we will receive as well, the more we will be. Um, how can we say this, susceptible to it because we are connecting with it even more. So I think it's important for us to remind ourselves of this. But going back to the chapters here, I would like just to focus on chapter. Let me make it this dark again because that way it's a little bit easier for us to see. On chapter 15, we start really diving to the city of justice. Please go back to the sessions. It would have been session 8, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, session 8, and we learn a little bit more about the city of justice as well as the other arrangements as well on further arrangements on chapter 16 and chapter 17 as well, what happened there. There's a lot of information of this. Why we were trying to recapitulate a little bit on this chapter, mainly because what happens on chapter 18 has to do a lot with this location. Um, we're going to read some of the passages and we're going to focus on a little bit, but it is, I am let me tell a little bit about myself. I am a person who loves structure, like love houses. For those of you who know me a little bit more, you know that I like fixing things. I like to admire architecture in general, right? Wanted to go to school to become an architect, didn't happen. But the reason I'm saying this is because in this chapter, we learn from Manuel de Miranda that the city of justice, the location where the obsessing minds and hearts created in the spiritual world, right? To maintain, to enslave minds and hearts. And what happens is now in this chapter, Manuel Filomeno de Miranda explains to us that there is a mapping of the location, right? So that they can section the location. Yes, really divide the location so that the location can be transported to another spiritual location. Yes, you're hearing what I just said. There is a work of high spirit, high architects, high engineers that are now that they are now, because the earth cannot hold these types of locations anymore. The actual city of justice, as had was actually mentioned in previous chapters, they're being sectioned off, like they're being taken into parts and actually being like lift or taking to another location, right? To another spiritual location. You may ask, Leo, what are you talking about? Please read the chapter and you will understand a little bit more and you will dive into this excitement that I'm trying to bring it to you. But if you don't read it, it's going to be hard. Even though we'll take some of the parts here and we'll understand a little bit more. But I just want you to picture, as if you had one of those big houses that are actually taken into parts. Sometimes we see these cranes, right? Huge cranes taking parts of a building that has been placed together, has been put together, and they are actually, taking to the place where they're going to be assembled with other parts. The other way that I can explain this that it came to mind is that perhaps when you are, I don't know if you ever seen a type of a big ship when it's being built, right? Where part of the ship is actually taken to the marina, if you want to call, where it will connect to other parts because they cannot build that section into that place. Now, here we're talking about building, right? But the this chapter actually brings to us that they're being taken apart. There are, these sections are taken to different places where they will now take it to other locations. Another question that may come to mind as we go through this, um, as we explain this, as Manuel Filomeno de Miranda explains to us, is that so what happens to the spirit that are there? A lot of spirits that cannot be rescued, who were enslaved, if for lack of better words, for such a long time, they cannot be rescued. So they are still in that location, and they are in let's say in a sleeping mode, right, where they are now taken to along with the location as they're sectioned off as well, right? So this is not to punish anyone or to do anything, but the work in order to continue, not only for the location but also here on Earth. This process needs to take place, right? So it's an amazing chapter. I want to just give this disclosure before, and it's very exciting to me to see and to come in contact as well with, how we manipulate universal cosmic fluid, right? How we can, and we're going to talk a little bit more about on how this touches our environment too, but how this actually is important to us to think that sometimes things we cannot change certain things, right? Sometimes we think that it is what it is. I have to deal with this, but it is all in the mind. It is all in the heart. Let us dive into it and read some of the parts of the chapter so we can kind of analyze a little bit further in terms of what really happened. While we treated some spirits obsession and related problems, the group of experts that had visited the caves located in the swamp had managed to map out the deepest of them, along with some internal gorges that served as prisons for the most rebellious spirits. So here we see that the work is being done, the mapping and the organization of all of the deepest part of the cave where they were. And again, let's go back to chapter 15 to refresh our minds and our hearts on what he's talking about here, because this was actually in a cave session of here on planet Earth, in the physical plane, on the planet in the northeast part of Brazil, that these mind created this very difficult environment for these rebellious spirits, or these enslaved spirits as well. It is very difficult to define and explain, as well as we wish, what the region of the city of Just was like. Such were the physical conditions of the area upon which it was built, in the torment of those who inhabit it. The what Manuel de Miranda brings to us is that, as he's saying here, that there are slums of absolute misery on earth. And he kind of gives a little bit more of information on it, that we don't have to think about it, or that we don't have to mention, but we can think that we have seen some of these places, right? I mean, we come in contact with some of very deplorable areas on planet Earth. Not, and we don't have to go far. Sometimes here in the U.S. as well, we can go into, we drive by certain places that is pretty difficult. And I'm not saying, folks, this in a negative way, but in an alerting way as well. And we're going to talk about more pretty soon. But the caves, however, surpass these landscapes, since one could hardly identify human beings amid other animals settled there in total promiscuity. So the deformity of these spirits, it's, the deformation, or the how they presented themselves, is not even human like. It's very deplorable. Hence, once more, the fact that these individuals, they cannot be here on planet Earth anymore. The way that they are living is not in a human-like form, um, conditioned to us on how we would like to live, how we would like to be perceived as well, right? Um, Not criticizing, but we're only analyzing the level, the evolutionary path of these beings, right? One day they will be like us. One day they will be better than us right now, right? The evolutionary path of each one of us is different, but this is to show the reason why this coordinated action is taking place, right? For some centuries, primitive entities waging wars on the planet, subjugating nations, devastating people, and destroying lives, reducing almost everything to dust and debris, decided to create that sinister city to serve as a punitive dungeon for those they considered enemies, or deserving of their tormented infernal treatment in the name of the reigning ignorance. Let us think of this right now. This is very important for all of us, and if I'll call your attention to this part of this chapter, because this is a location. This is a, we often take a step back. We often talk about the umbral, right, of life. We read a lot of information from André Luiz, and we think that the umbral is here or there, but we see that these locations does not have a specific geographic position, right? It depends on the mind. It depends on the creation, right? The creators of these locations as well. And we see that the reason why it was created, and why it was created, I'm sorry, the reason why it was created and how it was created as well, right? The purpose. And I dare to say one thing, that even these really primitive entities, they had a purpose, they have a purpose, they know what they're doing. Sometimes we find ourselves without a purpose, without, even with the intent to manipulate what we call the universal cosmic fluid around us, right? Meaning taking care of our lives, taking care of our environment, taking care of what we're listening to, what we're watching, what we're doing with our thoughts and our feelings, right? So just to kind of like, food for thought for us to see that, wait a minute, if they can do this, I'm also son and daughter of God, and I can do the same thing. Obviously, I'm not talking about negative things like this, but for us to take control of our lives, to be really exercising our free will, our will, every single minute of our lives, right? As if there is no tomorrow in the physical body. And Joanna de Angelis says quite a bit of this, that we have to exercise our free will. But it amazed me on how they were able to create such a deplorable location to enslave other minds, right? And for those who are in a guilt, let's say vibrational field or condition, guess what? They are enslaved in these locations, right? But I want to take another step and also question one thing that we see. If they're able to create a location like this, right, to enslave minds, who is there to say? And this is Leo saying, please don't put this on anyone else or Manuel de Miranda. But as I was diving, I wanted to share this with you because who is there to say who's not to say that these minds are also not influencing our physical environment nowadays, right? When we, as Manuel Filomeno de Miranda mentioned, is the slums of planet Earth, right? The deplorable locations, and I'm not only talking about the physical, I'm including the physical locations, but also the beautiful structures that we have on planet Earth. However, the minds and hearts of those individuals who are there are miserable, right? The individuals who are vibrating in those locations, even though they're beautiful, they're very miserable, right? And I say this because often we meet people that they live in a very beautiful place, but they're miserable. They're not happy. Everything, they have beauty, they have nature, but they're complaining about things. They're complaining about life, right? So sometimes it's not just the physical, but the condition that we live in, on how we are vibrating and how we are tuning ourselves with others, right? Let's go on. These are just, highlights that I want to bring. And as we were thinking, pondering about this information, it really triggers many questions, right? Many thoughts. A prolongation of physical life, they are the fruits of the collective thought of the discarnate, who created these transitory stronghold of purification through the actions of their tormented and guilty minds. Once the date of the very delicate operation was set, which was actually set for May 13th, the day of that we proclaimed the freedom of enslaved people in Brazil, groups of technicians would start to section off the immense stretches and start their removal, including their inhabitants, as we mentioned before, who would not be aware of what was happening, such was the state of their mental and emotional disorder. So think of this condition of, okay, we're being moved, but they don't know. They don't need to know, to tell you the truth, because this is being done to help them as well. In terms of the reasons why this is being done, we can only say that perhaps is because they do not vibratorily connect with planet Earth anymore. So again, it must be at such a deplorable state for them not to be able to stay here on planet Earth anymore. And there are other locations that on planet Earth right now, as we're going through the transition right now from a planet of trials and expiation to a planet of regeneration, that there being the same things happening, not only as it is with this location in Brazil, but also other locations around the world as well. So you can only think, right? I often play, with those who actually, work with me at the Spirit Society of Baltimore, trying to help one another on to live a better life, or or to start to think or imagine or get closer as much as we can to a reality of a planet of regeneration. Is to say, I like to say, we often say, what is in the planet of a planet that is considered a planet of regeneration, right? But I like to do the opposite. I like to say, what are the things that are not allowed anymore in the planet of regeneration? And here it is, right? This promiscuity, or this condition that we often find ourselves of enslaving others, or allowing ourselves to be enslaved as well, right? And many more other things. So there it is, another thought for you. If you like to exercise this in your life, what are the things that are not allowed in the planet of regeneration? In any case, just something for us to think and share with one another. Let's move on because there's much more to share here. One thing that also I would like to share with you that Manuel de Miranda brings to us is that these locations, they were considered, they were, and they will still be considered a training camp for many spirits. Look what he says. This is really interesting. Rightly so, in the past, mediums and psychics in general, saints, martyrs, and mystics too were led to the spirit world during their sleep, confronting a new reality. They would return to the physical world with the ideas that ultimately became embedded in people's ignorant minds as the purgatory, nowadays eliminated by the Church of Rome, and especially hell. In the opposite direction, some of them, equally during their sleep, would also visit the happy regions, which they call the heavens, classifying them according to Kabbalism in 7 tiers until sublimation, representing the highest level of glory and spirituality. The study and logic of the Spiritist teaching subsequently demonstrated that these regions are educational schools for human beings after the death of the body. So, in everything there is actually a learn process, right? And we often think, my gosh, this does not serve us anymore. But let us think about history, right? Do we study history for those individuals who go to school to become a historian, or to study in depth, certain parts of our history, of our past? Is it just for fun? No, there is a reason for it, right? There is a we can always go back and say, look, this is important. And obviously, if we, fell this way before, or if we did not do the right things before, guess what? Now we're being called to do the right things, right? We're being called to become better individuals, become better beings. So it's important that we take that as an example as well, and say, look, these minds, us, sometimes when we sleep, guess what? Or after discarnation, we go to these locations to study. For some of you, this may be a scary thought, but I dare to say, what are we watching on TV? How do we get certain movie producers, whatever name we want to call, to create such a deplorable locations, right? Where do they learn these things? Where do they get these things from? We are a couple days away from Halloween, and we see some very difficult things on the streets on how what people are actually putting on as a customer. And I'm not here to judge or anything like that. But where do they get these ideas, right? These scary movies that we see, and all these things that are still happening on planet Earth. But I'll say one more thing. Why are we still vibrating the same way? Why are we connecting ourselves to these types of, let's say, vibration in general, right? So it's something that we want to also include in the world that is not in the world of regeneration, right? How will be Halloween in a world on a planet of regeneration? What we think it will be? Well, it could be that, Leo, perhaps we're not going to have Halloween anymore. Perhaps we will. Perhaps we will celebrate beauty. Perhaps we'll celebrate the different customs, positive customs, where we see beauty, where we see that we come in contact with perhaps arts, right? Different types of arts, right? But again, this is the future, and I'm just kind of like trying to digest so much information and to make part of our days as well, right? Make this part of our living, right? On how we emanate ourselves and what we receive as well, because the options will be many, right? in many cases, we're not in control of what is being shown to us. However, we are in control of what we receive, what we attain with us, and most importantly, we are also responsible to what we are showing on how we are showing ourselves. Let's move on as we continue with more details on this chapter. I actually took the liberty to call this passage of this chapter, chapter 18, direct and indirect attacks. Let us analyze what happens here. Meanwhile, at the institution, a dedicated worker loved by all recently started to present symptoms of Parkinson's disease. And although treated with the available resources, his condition continued to worsen. It was now affecting his thinking, leading him to episodes of delusion and sometimes a total loss of reason. With this information, I want to make a parenthesis and actually say two things here. Number one, let us not think that this work that is being done on planet Earth right now, or any of us are doing to better ourselves, to enhance our lives, to change the lives of others. Because if we change our lives, guess what? Automatically, we'll be changing the environment of others. If we clean our houses, guess what? Everybody will smell the the effects, right, of of us cleaning the house. It smells better. We take the clutter away and all those things, and everybody feels what's happening, the changes around the house. So it's the same thing with our moral. It's the same thing with our thoughts, our feelings. When we change, guess what? People start feeling. However, unfortunately, there are those who do not want us to succeed in our endeavors, in our change, because they unfortunately still vibrate in a negative way. This can be people who are connected with us physically. This can be, most of the time, a lot as well, the influences of the other side, the spiritual side. So it's important for us to acknowledge this, not to be afraid, but also to see that they still need help. There's a lot of spirit, there are a lot of those who are incarnated with us who are in need of help as well, just as we were when we were not in the same page as we are right now. The second thing that I would like to say is that um, I'm sorry, just going back. So as the work is actually happening of changing planet Earth, guess what? There are a lot of spirits that are working against this change. They don't want to the planet Earth to go to transition into a world of regeneration. They want to stay the way we are, right? They are persisting in the negative things. Now, moving on to the second thing that I would like to say, when we see someone who has a disease, who has a terminal disease, who has, is going through a tough moment, right? We pray for them, we wish them well, right? And that doesn't mean that this is a actual an obsession from the spirit world. What happens is because of the failure of the physical body that naturally goes on, many of us can face several issues in our lives, right? We have family members who are going through certain issues, unfortunately we don't have cures yet for certain issues, right? Sometimes it's the state of mind of that individuals, and all that we can do is to give them some comfort, some help as much as we can, so they don't continue to suffer or they suffer less, and pray so that when they find themselves on the other side, they liberate themselves from the pain, from the difficulties that they went through. When we bring a case like this here, it doesn't mean that this is someone who is suffering because of an obsession. It is a condition that is worsening because of the spirit obsession. It is a failure of the body, and then the spirits who want to propitiate, if we can say that this way, suffering, they come and they do that. Unfortunately, this is a planet that we are um, living. So when we bring this case here, it's not for us to say, "Oh my gosh, this person is have Parkinson's disease now because of obsession." No, there is a deterioration of the physical body, and then perhaps the negative minds, for lack of better words, they come and they make it worse, and it can happen. However, like we said at the beginning, help is on the way, always 24/7. We just need to attune with them and help one another. Let's continue on this case and let's see what happens. More recently, his mental deterioration led him to declare that he was being harassed by one of the institution directors. Attempts were made to help him with heartfelt explanations and recommended medication, but without any assurances that his health would be restored. Everything had been in vain because as the disease progressed, he now has difficult of movement and speech, spending hours in rebellion and reiterating his alleged persecution. So we see here that with the difficulties that he was going through, not being able to have full control of the physical body, the obsessors come and they take pleasure in the situation, number one, and they utilize this case, this man who was, as we can see here, a dedicated worker of the Spiritist Center, to create madness in the Spiritist Center because he believed that he was being harassed by one of the institution directors. Look at this. That a good worker of the Spiritist Center now in a difficult situation, physical situation, is accusing someone else that perhaps they were friends of in the past that he was being harassed. So just to create madness in the environment of light, of help, instead of allowing the environment to be right. I wanted just to bring this is actually a little bit off beyond this passage, but it's important for us to see how important the Spiritist Center is in our lives, right? Us Spiritists, the spiritualists, those who want to know a little bit more, we have different types of work that explains what the Spiritist Center is for us. But Manuel de Miranda mentioned something really interesting, that is Spiritist Center undoubtedly is a sanctuary of emergency relief to many troubled lives, extending immediate comfort and guidelines of equilibrium, preventing further entanglements in situation more perverse and complex than those experienced before seeking assistance. So it helps in the situations that, as we are seeing here, as well as is a preventive measure for us to live a good life. It's really interesting for us to see this because even though these situations may happen to us, we're not immune from this because we're part of this planet Earth. Sorry to say. I mean, we can be going through this and it happens, right? I've seen situations dealing with the public as I work directly with the public where there is many confusion with family members when a father or a mother passes and they start fighting with one another, even about the health of the dying family member. It's very difficult, extremely difficult. So we're not immune. We just have to find out, okay, how can I help, right? I believe that would be the best position for us to be. So then the what happens is that Manuel de Miranda explains to us that the situation is not dealt directly right away with it, even though they discovered they were giving some time, hours, okay, to ponder about it, and then they schedule a mediumistic meeting. In the mediumistic meeting, as we have seen other cases that we have presented here, the mediums, the mediums and the workers of the mediumistic meeting, during their sleep, they come and they have the spirit that is being obsessed, the dedicated worker that now has Parkinson's disease, obviously, as well as the mind that is obsessing this good worker, right? And the obsessor says the following: we will lead him to commit suicide in the initial phase of the program we intended to carry out. Starting this very moment, the good times of ignorance and representing and repressing religions responsible for much of civilization's folly now give way to everything is permissible, to wild pleasures and unlimited wantonness. The crucified one will once more be evaluated and punished for the audacity of presenting himself as the savior of humanity. He doesn't mention the word Jesus, but he's talking about our master Jesus. He continues and says, as for this impostor with this saintly behavior, who for some time now has taken refuge in this purification, then he still has a lot to purge before conquering the beacon of light that is the kingdom of God amid human miseries. We will prove that the saintly robe he wears is a disguise, and the sacred guidelines he follows are nothing more than utopia and deceit, that he is as miserable as any of us who know him, who know him well behind that mask of hypocrisy. As you can see here, folks, the spirit, the obsessing spirit, is not saying anything new, if I can say that way. We know that we are coming from a tough condition. We know that we are in the baby steps of changing our lives. We know that we are only now in this evolutionary path accepting a spiritual life, right? A continuation, a life after life, right? We're only now in the baby steps of accepting that we are responsible for our actions if we accept something a continuation of life, as well as accepting that this life is a continuation of my past, right? Guess what? Now, what I'm going through is it's just a consequence. Not that we cannot change, not that we can live these consequences with happiness to the best of our abilities. Yes, there will be a lot for us to face, but we can. So nothing that we don't know here, but they still accuse him. They still want him to suffer. And the reason I said direct and indirect because they're accusing and they're persecuting this good worker of the past. But let us think one thing here that is a direct attack, but there is an indirect attack here. It's not just the individual, but it's the institution, the Spiritist Center. And also, one thing that I would like to add is that the indirect attack here to show others, to promote to others that where's Jesus now? Where is the savior in this whole thing, right? And I'm quite sure that there are many minds that are connecting with this unfortunate thought, unfortunate feeling that perhaps when they find themselves without hope, without help, that they ask themselves and they ask others, where's Jesus? Where's religion? Right? Putting responsibility on others, putting responsibility on other situations, right? And God saying, where are you now, Creator, right? And we say this here to warn our hearts, warn our minds that perhaps there's more to it, right? When we truly embrace our past and we take responsibility, things are changed a little bit more. In any case, let's continue. Spinelli mentally signaled Claudio, who utilized the energies he possessed, was able to emit successive waves of harmony, preventing the mental emissions of rancor, and violence to reach their targets. And this is actually as they're dealing with the obsessing mind, they were, trying to help others, try to connect with others. They're trying to help those who are connected with this obsessing spirit. When other spirits join their companions, employing their mental powers to emit deleterious thoughts and vibration, Euripides Barçanufo, in turn, in deep concentration, began to pray in a tender and compassionate tone, triggering a moving phenomenon. Fragrant rose petals began to gently fall, dissolving when touching us as well. Look what happens to finalize this chapter as they are going through this work. The issuing light allowed us to see groups of dissolute rebellious spirits beyond the limits of the room, mingling with human beings away from their bodies during their physiological sleep, floundering in emotional conflict and feverish desires of sensual passions. Truly deranged, they praised the names of earthly leaders who submitted to them and spread the aberrations. With Reiko's mockery, they sang songs that exalted vile sex, infanticide, suicide, challenging law and order, the union between parents and children, siblings and family members, in an unbearable promiscuity. Lasciviousness and moral degradations were part of the new behavior of a society without boundaries, with pedophilia exalting the pleasure of violence and aggressiveness, generating a veritable chaos among them in an unrestrained orgy. Folks, if this is not scary, I don't know what else we can say about this, right? As you can see, unfortunately, this is still is how many minds, many hearts are vibrating on planet Earth. So we urge one another to take charge, take charge and be persistent, right? On goodness, on what is um, in 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 conjunction or hand in hand with the teachings of the gospel, right? And it's not an easy work. It's not a overnight change for any of us, right? And it's something that we need to start and we need to persist on. I don't know what else we can say in terms of how difficult this is and how much work we need to do in order for us to change this. When I say to change, it's not to expel these minds, but to leave to our mentors, leave to God and our Master Jesus to say, let me be at service, but let me be at service in charge, right? Where the negative things that we see that come in contact, um, it's not, it's going to rebound from us, right? We're going to put a stop to it, right? And that is in general everything, what we watch, what we listen to, what we connect, how we're praying, how we're connecting with God, right? Um, are we bad mouthing someone? All of these negative things need to stop because, as you can see here, it's very easy for us to connect with these rebellious spirit, right? Again, a lot to learn, a lot to exercise and put into practice. Let us finalize this session. There's a couple more things that we would like to say, but mainly to, first of all, as we start chapter 19, to give our thanks to frontliners. Why? Manuel Filomeno de Miranda takes this chapter and truly, 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 um, it is a exaltation of the work of the frontliners during the pandemic. As I mentioned before at the beginning of our session, this is actually um, a happening. This happened actually during the pandemic, right? As we saw, as we're going to see a little bit here, the this instant as he starts, bringing us the chapter 19. I'm sorry, the disclosure chapter 18 and 19. This is right around the second wave of the virus, right? When there was a decline of the transmission rate as well, and then start going up again as people kind of relaxed a little bit and they went back to the craziness that was happening before, right? Oh no, we're okay now. Guess what? It started all over again. Which in a pandemic like that, usually it happens, right? Until it flattens completely, and then obviously we were able to have the vaccine, all around the world and whatnot, and things are a little bit better now. But again, a huge thank you for frontliners. And I say this because it's important for us to be grateful. Be grateful for the work that these people do. The doctor, the nurses, the policemen, many as well of men in uniform as well. I remember when I went to receive my first dose of the vaccine, not putting the vaccine up front there, people or selling the vaccine to anyone, but just something that crossed my mind that the individuals who were actually at the location that I went, which was a stadium, were actually uniformed men and women who were conducting the effort of distributing the vaccine as well, and many other doctors and nurses, different hospitals working for the government, state and federal government as well. I also want to acknowledge the people who cooks inside of these hospitals, right? The people who are not directly connected, but the people who are putting themselves in a situation that they can actually contract a disease or something, right? And they truly believe that they're there for a reason. And we're going to see a little bit more about this that Manuel Filomeno de Miranda brings to us. But it's interesting for us to stop and really think how much these people have done for us, how much these people have um, sacrificed for us, because they are also sons and daughters of God, as well as of other people. They have families, they have kids, they have husband and wife. They had to go home. They still have to go home, right? So imagine the sacrifice. Many of these people could not be with their family because they were afraid that if they had contracted something, they would take it to their family. So tonight, if anything, I would ask you, let us say a prayer for these individuals, right? Let us send our gratitude to them if we haven't done so. And if we have, let's do it again because they need it, right? Because there are still many people out there, many of these frontliners that are sacrificing their lives for us right now. So the frontline workers, before we go and dive a little bit onto the emphasis on it, the Manuel de Miranda, as I mentioned, says that the pandemic resurfaced on the planet after it seemed to be over, as we said before, as a second wave struck with the same perverse force, taking advantage of tired and rebellious populations that insisted in dismissing it for the economic benefit and recovery of many countries. Simultaneously, the consequences of the cruel disease and the social and moral upheavals continue to shake the planet, with several countries in total disarray. I want to take a step back here, and one of the things that crossed my mind was that the the during the pandemic, I remember speaking with others, and some other people also came into the consensus that, perhaps people would have kind of like slow down a little bit, that that they would have, but little to be known, obviously. I mean, I'm, I don't understand social life. I'm not a psychologist. By all means, I mean, the little that I come in contact is, studying spiritism and other topics as well. But the opposite happened, right? We all know that many people, all the desire to do things and to go out and to break into the world and do the things that they were stopped from doing from the time that they had to stay home. Guess what? It was multiplied. That drive was multiplied, right? And these are the minds that it is connected, right? He says here, tired and rebellious populations, right? The people who, instead of saying, wait a minute, this is coming for me to really watch and perhaps offer myself and others around me a different way of life, a different way of thinking and perceiving the world. However, that is not what happened. Most of us, we elected to go crazy again and to do the things that we didn't do before, right? Again, not criticizing. We all have our free will, but there are consequences for when we lose control of ourselves. Displaying an unusual hunger, individuals felt irresponsible, irrepressible, and sordid desires for bedlam and rebellion, seemingly contained for a long time, but which now could burst forth in limitless pleasures and crude extravagances, right? The driving forces of sex in disarray, resulting from minds fermented by the excess characteristics of a behavior that had been repressed almost by force, now erupted in torrents of endless licentiousness. All of this that we're bringing here is to not really only to point out, as we said it before, studying as if it was our history, because it is history now, right? To say, let us not follow this, but mainly to say, did we actually have these thoughts within us as well? Did we connect with some of these things? Oh, I want to go out, I want to travel, I want to do this, I want to do, but not in a let's say educated way, but more as a escape mode, right? Because we were tired of living what we went through, and it's not easy. I also like to add that many children, went through some tough moments, right? Many young minds, right? Teenagers, they couldn't do much, right? And what happens after, right? So all of this, as we said before, there is a learning curve behind it, And we can go back and say, what if this were to happen again? Hopefully not, but not in the way that it happened. But if I am being stopped from do something that I want to do in my life, what is the reason why? What is the teaching that the learnings that I can get out of it, right? So again, if we have limitations in our lives, let us learn from it, right? And let us not rebel against it. Human beings unprepared ethically let themselves be consumed by pleasures that do not satisfy. Naturally, attunement with spirits of the same moral level attuning, giving way to overpowering spirit obsessions. We often say that is actually the spirit. We often say that, oh, I'm being influenced. I have no control, but we need to connect it somehow, right? Nobody's gonna knock on our door, um, uh, asking, where's the party if we don't announce the party. It can be explicitly, it can be implicit, right? If we're not vibrating in that way, obviously, if people knock on our door, it may be because of the past. It may be because something that we still have to work on. However, most of the time we will receive or all the time, I should say, let me correct myself, the help of our Master Jesus, our Creator, our mentors, to help us if we really change, even though we have to still correct something with those of the past. Thus, it is actually the discarnate who influence the incarnate. Here it is. In preserving that stage of moral vileness and lower sentiments, combating with ferocity the principles of dignity, honorability, and a behavior aligned with the orderly laws of nature, fostering spirituality in the ancestral passions of the evolutionary process. I'll read the beginning again. Thus, it is actually the discarnate who influence the incarnate in preserving that stage of moral vileness and lower sentiments. Let us really connect the dots here. The obsessions are happening, but there's got to be a foundation. There's got to be a connection with it. There's got to be the willingness to accept what is not good in order for them to come and obsess us, right? It's not freely. There's got to be some binding contract between the two individuals. It's still relatively distant are the days of love and the decency that will prevail all over the earth, resulting from the great change that is not underway. A world of regeneration and order will be established by the human beings themselves, longing for peace and equilibrium, tenderness and respect for themselves and their neighbors. One thing that I want to say here, that these paragraphs that I'm bringing here, they're not connected directly or right in order, if you will. But I'm bringing this here to also kind of extract the ideas from Manuel de Miranda, that in this case here we see perhaps, yeah, there is a lot of craziness going on, but there are also a lot of individuals, a lot of spirits that are now incarnated on earth, that wants a change. They wanted to see a change. They are working hard within themselves. They're not perfect yet, and this is one key element here for our evolutionary path. Do not Let us not think that the majority is bad, nor that the majority is good. They're doing the best that they can. Perhaps they're not hitting right at bullseye when they are aiming for something, but they're trying. And sometimes we need to at least praise the effort, right? The outcome may not be the best, but at least we need to praise the effort. I think this is important for us to say and to analyze as well in this evolutionary path, because sometimes, because we see or we feel the urge to change, we tend to apply this in a very demanding way towards others, right? And when someone does something that is not appropriate, guess what? We tend to really we become disappointed, right? Because we're expecting something that, number one, is not perhaps what we're going to get, and they're not perfect yet, right? How can we demand perfectness from others if we're not there yet? So think it's important for us to bring these two elements to our evolutionary path. Not everybody's bad, not everybody's good yet. So I think that it leaves us this ability to evaluate things in a little bit more positive way. Moving on. Concomitantly, the process of reincarnation overseen by the selection departments of communities in the spirit world produced massive rebirths on Earth. Once more, the repeat offenders would have the opportunity to free themselves from the heavy burden of their inner tendencies and adapt to the new standards of honor that already exist in the planet, thanks to the natural evolution of Christianity restored by the incomparable blessings of Spiritism. I'm gonna share something with you personal. When I read this, I was like, oh my God, some of these individuals are they're giving another chance to reincarnate on Earth. Yes. And the first thing that came to mind, not a medium, but I'm quite sure that sometimes we have the insights, as you do as well. I have some insights that it was very beautiful. That the insight that came to me was this goes to show how beautiful and how um, kind is our Master Jesus, the governor of this planet, allowing these minds to reincarnate as a last moment, as a last chance to say, please regenerate yourself. Regenerate yourself with others who wants to live a positive life. Be kind. Be of a open heart. Be like children as he taught us, right? And that kept, going on in my mind. And I was like, wow, what a beautiful thing. Because I question, and it's okay to question, right? Spiritism brings this, that gives us this ability to question these things. It's not that we're trying to be better than God or anything like that, but with all that we read from Mr. Miranda here, and all the other teachings that we are, or all the other difficulties that we are seeing on planet Earth, alive, right, day to day, we are, we come through a passage, such a passage, that again goes to show how merciful is our Master Jesus, how merciful is God giving us this ability. The devoted workers of the good are urged to take precautions against defamation, pride, senseless selfishness, the demands for external purity, the infamies and accusations hurled against brothers and sisters in the circles of union and fraternity. What is Manuel de Miranda bringing in this chapter as well is the fact that as we try to change ourselves and change our environment, we need to be aware of this right here. Taking precautions about defamation, pride, senseless selfishness, the demands for external purity, all of these things that perhaps exalt the ego, right? We need to make sure that we're watching, that we're paying attention, right? That we're praying for ourselves and we're praying for others as well, so that the work continues, so that perhaps we're not connecting with the justice makers, as we learn here as well. May they all consider themselves students of the good tidings, taking refuge in the doctrine of love, demonstrating it in actions rather than self-aggrandizing with pompous words as well. The true workers deserving recognitions are those who set an example for what they do for the cause, and do not those and not those who are more concerned with their spirit organizations, and the people who run them. They all deserve our respect and consideration, but the true honorable leadership we will find in Jesus and his disciple Allan Kardec, as well as those who dedicated themselves to this endeavor with selfless and valor. There will always be martyrs, conscious of it or not, in all evolutionary process of our planetary Earth. And here's the to finalize this chapter in this session as well, because we're coming to time right now, is the reminder that we have to really take care of ourselves, to really take this opportunity that we have now on planet Earth, as we come into a consensus that we are a spirit in this evolutionary path, in this very short period of time in this physical body, and we will have many, many lives, many, many opportunities still to evolve, so as our brothers and sisters. to make sure that we really pay attention to the cause, not to the institution that we're a part of, not to the people that we're connected of, right? Yes, there are a lot of individuals that we care, that perhaps this is not the first time, this is not our first rodeo, right? That together we have been reincarnated many lifetimes, right, together. That's why we care so much for one another. We don't want to let the other fall. However, we are individuals, and we also have to care about how am I um, um, what am I doing? What kind of work am I doing for society right now? Not just that institution. So, in other words, what am I doing home? What am I? How am I doing? Perhaps at work. Am I a spiritist only at the spiritist center? Am I a spiritist during my sleep? Right? Am I a spiritist as well when I'm taking a shower and taking care of myself? When I go to the gym? When I go to the grocery store? So let us live a spiritual life wherever we are, whether in the physical body, whether we disconnect on the other side as well when we go to sleep, and most importantly, as well as when we discarnate from this physical body, right? So Manuel de Miranda goes back to to the title of this chapter, which is the workers, right? When he says there will always be martyrs, conscious or not, conscious of it or not, in all evolutionary processes of our planetary orb. And he talks about something really interesting, that before reincarnating, a lot of these individuals that we see as frontliners nowadays, they pledge to help brothers and sisters even at the higher cost of physical life. And from the great beyond to where they return under loving protection, they continue to help the other sick and different stage of the disease. So a lot of these people who were helping, those who stayed here with us, thank God. Those also, thank God, that went to the other side because perhaps they finished the work that they had to do, that they promised that they would do. They were reincarnating, pledging to be martyrs. Say, look, I want to help society. I want to give myself to a greater cause than perhaps I can even fathom, right? I want to give myself. So more than ever, let us praise God for this, for these people. Let us, send them good vibrations. Those who discarnated and those who are still here with us. If you see a nurse, say thank you. If you see a doctor, thanks for going to school and becoming a doctor and really applying yourself to what you're doing. If you see someone of uniform, thank them for their service. A veteran, thank them for their service. Only God knows what they went through and what they're still going through after coming back from a service abroad or serving our country as well. The people who clean, the people who work in this difficult locations that I would like to say that I'm very far from being able to do such a work, right? So it's important that we acknowledge these individuals, and as we do so, we're also acknowledging life. To finalize, Mr. Miranda says the following: if society were more aware of its divine origin and the countless spiritual resources to assist human beings during their physical journey, the powers of the two planes of life would more easily coalesce to benefit the common cause, the attaining of moral progress. The attainment, thus preserving humankind from the painful wear and tear of the lower conditions of suffering, becoming healthier than it is today. If we were to be in a position to say, wow, I have so much in my hand right now, I have so many resources, right? Physical, spiritual, mental, the people around me, and everything that goes on around me, we would not be in this position. And we would be putting these resources um, to work more effectively for all of us. Patients that recover do not always remember those who sacrificed themselves so that they could keep on living. They buy time for life-saving vaccines to be developed and surpass the experimental phases for future relief, as occurred with previous epidemics and calamities now under control. These are the works that these people were doing for us, right? In one of the moments where this topic was discussed, as they were actually talking about this help, or as well as the gratitude that we often lack, right, to present and to show and to feel, right? Dr. Dalbo, who continued to study viruses in the afterlife, conveyed to us the gravity hovering over humanity, with some countries dedicated to creating dangerous viruses for a possible biological war, using biological weapons, stockpiles, much more powerful than any other conventional or nuclear destructive power. As long as human feelings between the negation of God and the aberration of novel philosophies, damaging to human dignity and equilibrium relating to the universe and its sovereign laws, the proliferation of evils will exist, provided by the mind and the inner torments in constant fluctuation until the cessation of will and the break from reality occur in the abyss of spiritual blindness. To finalize, folks, in a moment of reflection, our mentor explained to us that the likeness of an army is hovering in the psychosphere of the planet, directly influencing many of its reincarnated members during these last stretches of the preparation for the final stage. Their connection allows them to steer conflicts among minorities and the large human mass, to foment wider movements of violence. Individuals who arm themselves with hatred in the spirit world are now members of many justice divisions for equality and human rights, which should also extend to moral and social duties. And it has generated daily clashes like a barreling snowball, flattening everything on its way down. Among them, fanatical and frivolous leaders, fomenters of anarchy and turmoil aimed at the inciting unrest and cause incalculable losses. After all, many of these agitators have no higher goal than simply making use of their ignorance and piety to generate and build up easily exasperating dispositions. It's not a good way to finish the chapter, but we want to bring to you what is hovering upon the earth right now, on earth right now. What is happening on earth right now? Not only in the spiritual sense, but many of the minds that Manuel Filomeno de Miranda is saying here that is actually inserted in the physical body, say incarnated beings, they are representatives of this legion of individuals who does not want us to succeed, who does not want us to prevail or to evolve, right, to say the least, right? So it's important for us to read more, study more, ponder more before we say anything because we don't know all, but at least to be more alert. But at least before we go and drive ourselves crazy with all the nonsense that is being bombarded at us, right? That we take a step back and say, wait a minute, maybe I need to rethink about this before I say or foment more or connect, if anything, with these crazy minds, right? These are these two are chapter 18 and chapter 19 are very beautiful chapters, a lot of information. We urge you again to go and read it, to learn from it. Make questions, ask questions, send me questions, and I would love to share more of this with everyone. um, Unfortunately, because of time, we have to finalize it. There is more that I would like to bring it to you, but it's just a way for us to evolve and to really analyze what is my purpose here on earth? What is my purpose now in this physical life, right? And we do have the right, or let us say the duty, to watch our thoughts, our feelings, on how we're vibrating towards one another, right? So that we can create this world of regeneration that Manuel Filomena de Miranda, through the hands of the medium Divaldo Franco, is bringing to us here in this book and the previous books that we mentioned as well. Please send your questions, send your comments to us. We would like to share, to hear from you, what you have learned. What are you thinking about the what we mentioned here today, especially talking about this chapter, these two chapters that we have brought here, the location where the justice maker created, right, and how they were moving, or all the other things. But the moral changes is what we want to hear from you as well. How this will change your life, and the life of others too. So we have covered quite a bit, as we mentioned before. We only have chapter 20, closing words, where we're going to cover that during the month of November. However, we're not only going to cover the chapter, but also we will, excuse me, we will cover, we will do a recapitulation of all the other chapters, what happened here, as well as in connection to these, the two previous books as well, that we have covered, and how they come together to help us, to create this world of regeneration as well. We would like to thank you for sharing this moment with us, to allow us to come to your home, to your space, to your mental space, to your heart, to hopefully change your environment. With no further ado, I thank you so much for this opportunity, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.